It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. And last we spoke, we were happy. I was happy, in a good mood, talking about how yesterday, January 6, 2021, was an historic day. Well, little did we know in that moment just how historic that day would become. Because we spoke before the hit the fan, before all hell broke loose. Yesterday, I was watching the hearing. I was watching the joint session of Congress. PBS Online was covering it gavel to gavel live. Good, okay. So that's where I was tuned in. So, I saw it happen live, and then, of course, I was just glued to the coverage for the next 12 hours. It was about 11 o'clock in the evening then when I gave up and said, okay, well, all right, that's enough for one day. So I'm just gonna go through my notes, and forgive me if this is a little disjointed. Let's start with this morning. Somebody posted on Twitter. Of course, the Orange Menace doesn't have a Twitter account at the moment. He's been locked out, finally. Twitter finally had enough. So this is from the Orange Menace's social media director. Quote, "Even though I totally disagree with the outcome of the election and the facts bear me out, nevertheless, there will be an orderly transition on January 20th. While this represents the end of the greatest first term in presidential history, it's only the beginning of our fight to make America great again." That's the most contrite we've heard him. He didn't write that. You can tell the ones he writes and the ones he doesn't write. This is grammatically correct. So obviously he didn't write this one. And we've had plenty of occasions in the past where he's been forced to say something, after Charlottesville or a couple of other cases. And, of course, it's people putting words in his mouth. It's rare, but it's happened a couple of times, and he always backtracks almost immediately. So we can take zero comfort from this tweet. Zero. He really must be either impeached, 25th Amendmented, he must resign. He just really must be removed immediately because he still presents a clear and present danger. He has way too much power, even in his current state. He's still the president of the United States, and that's just unacceptable on its face. Speaking of tweets, here's the one that got him kicked off the platform about 5 years too late in my estimation. Quote, "These are the things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and viciously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home with love and in peace. Remember this day forever." So, speaking of things he's forced to do, this is another example. Everyone from Joe Biden to anyone you can name was demanding that the president make a statement. Apparently, people around him were just begging him to say something about how this has to end. And so, this was his statement. We also had the little video he made where he said, "We love you and you're special." So he said, we have to go home and we have to be peaceful. And that's about as far as he went. The rest of his messaging was all about how I love you, you're special, I feel your pain, you had every right to do this, basically. Bottom line, take no comfort in any of this. He really, really has to be removed today, right now, this hour. Okay, crowd size. I know it's not all that important, but I was just really kind of curious. Because when I first tuned in yesterday, it was before the hearing started, and I caught the tail end, or a good portion actually, of his rally speech to the insurrectionists, to the domestic terrorists, to his MAGA minions. And at one point he said there were 250,000 people that he was talking to. And I thought, well, that can't be right. And as I was watching the coverage, I was flipping around my sources trying to find somebody who would tell me the estimated crowd size, and I couldn't find it. At one point in the coverage, Yamichel Sindor of PBS, that was my main source yesterday. More about that in a minute. They did a great job. Oh, my goodness. Later that evening, Yamish said, referring to his rally speech, that he spoke to several hundred people. Several hundred people. Amna Navas, also of PBS, and she was covering outside the Capitol. That was her position. She at one point said about 1,000 or maybe just over 1,000. And the pictures I was seeing throughout the day, I never saw more than about 1,000 people, maybe, in one shot. I never saw it. Now later, I finally found one article that said estimates were anywhere between 5,000 and 20,000. So your guess is as good as mine. If you have heard more accurate estimates, I'd just be really curious to know. I also don't know how many people. I mean, with all the news coverage, you'd think you'd have basic facts. Nobody has told me from all of my reading how many people got into the building, how many insurrectionists got into the building. That's just a basic fact. I mean, if you don't know exactly, fine, but can you give me an estimate? I honestly don't know. It's just based on a bunch of pictures and video I saw. A couple of dozen? A couple of hundred? I honestly don't know. And it just bugs me when I can't find basic information. For all the coverage yesterday, much of it very good, why don't I get that first paragraph? The basic who, what, where questions. Journalists, come on, man. Is that too much to ask? All right. So back to the hearing for a little while here in my notes. This is before the breach, as they're calling it, which is a great word. Just linguistically speaking, I think it's a really good word. It really fits, the sound of the word fits the meaning of the word. It's not exactly onomatopoeia, but it has kind of a punch, kind of a solid and ominous character. Anyway, where was I? Oh, okay. So before it all hit the fan, I got some notes here from the hearing. A quote from Mitch: "We cannot declare ourselves a national board of elections on steroids." And he also said this election was not close. In fact, pretty much his whole floor speech was pretty great. Now, I'm not going to give him too much credit because, he's an educated, articulate guy, and he can say pretty things. And in this case, he said all the right things, and I actually agreed with everything he said. But we know Mitch McConnell, we know his heart, and we know he says what serves him in the moment. He's also the guy who said, I don't have the exact quote here, but something about how his greatest moment or his proudest moment was when he looked Barack Obama in the eye and said, "You're never going to get a hearing for your Supreme Court nominee," when he vowed to make him a one-term president and to obstruct everything he did. So, we know Mitch. We've known Mitch for a long time. So let's not lose perspective. It was a pretty interesting floor speech, and it was well put. But no, Mitch McConnell doesn't fool me. I did think for a second, I had one weak moment. I thought, well, maybe now that he's lost his leadership, or at least he will in a couple of days here, maybe he's found some perspective. When politicians are on their way out, sometimes they'll become more insightful or more honest. Just for a fleeting moment, I had that thought, but I don't think so. All right, so I'm watching the hearing. Cruz gets up and does what you expect Cruz to do. What a knob this guy is. Another pet peeve of mine, he said half the country thinks the election was fraudulent. No. That's just a demonstrably incorrect statement. It's a lie. A very small fraction of Americans believe that the election was fraudulent. A percentage of Republicans. So, no, half the country does not believe that. All right, so they don't get very far into this thing before it happens. And I don't know if you were watching live. We've all seen plenty of coverage, but if you were watching when it happened, live as it happened, that was quite an experience. That was quite an experience. I'm jumping a little bit back and forth here. Let's jump ahead to Joe's statement. Was very good. This is what I like about Joe. We disagree on almost all policies, me and Joe. But you know what? When it comes to something like this, some kind of a national emergency, some sort of, the president has to make a statement, one of these moments, nobody does it better than Joe. He's the best. He's right up there with Barack. He and his team, whoever's back there behind the curtains, they write a hell of a speech. When the moment calls for it, Joe Biden delivers. And yesterday was a perfect example. Just right in his wheelhouse. He said all the right things. Called him a mob, called him a small fraction. This is not America. Put plenty of blame right at Trump's feet. Said he incited them. Didn't dance around. He was just very bold, very direct. And this is what Joe does best. I can't think of any other person who would do it better. Good for you. He did a great job. So again, I'm watching PBS. Judy Woodruff is anchoring the coverage, and she shares with us the Orange Menace's video tweet. She reads the text. So I go to Twitter, I listen to it, and that's the one that says, okay, well, it's time to leave now. It's time to go home now and be peaceful. But in the 1-minute video, he spends almost all of it praising the insurrectionists. I love you. You're special. You're absolutely right and justified to be upset and angry because of the evil people who stole this election from you and from me and from America. And he just went on and on. He spent the full 60 seconds calling us evil, telling them how much he loved them. And he tossed in, well, it's time to go home now, because somebody was, holding a gun to his head. And shortly after, it was no longer available. Twitter said, no, we've had enough of this. It was right around then that I learned that a person had been shot, and it took quite a while to get some information. All we knew is that one person had been shot. Turned out later it was a woman. She was one of the perps. She was a QAnon person. She was a full-blown MAGA. And she stormed in and wound up getting shot and killed. Reports aren't telling us, at least I haven't seen exactly who shot her. Somebody, a security person. Also heard at that point that 6 people were hospitalized and that officers had been injured. Security officers had been injured. But at that point, we're getting fuzzy information and no numbers, really. All right, and I got to say now, here's where it really becomes amazing to me. Lisa Desjardins, congressional correspondent for PBS NewsHour. She was in the building when it happened. And so she had her little, I don't know if she had a phone or a little portable camera, what she was using, but she was reporting live from the scene, from various parts of the building as she was being shuffled around. For quite a while, she was just kind of on her own. And at one point, she finds a quiet spot to talk with the anchor, Judy Woodruff, and she's talking to us. And here come a bunch of the MAGA people running down the hall, and she sort of ducks under a counter, and it was just incredible. Now, in her shot, we see fleetingly, but clearly, the Capitol Police, guns drawn on the invaders, forcing them down onto the floor. And we're seeing this live as it happens. And she's right there. I mean, I'm talking right there. She could have easily just reached over and grabbed the security guy. That's how close she was. So this was the kind of coverage I was seeing live as it happened. Anybody watching PBS. Now, I had every device I could find. A couple of laptops, a couple of computers, a couple of tablets, whatever I have in the house. And I had, CNN over here, and I had MSNBC over there, and I had C-SPAN over there. And I tell you, nobody was covering it in these early moments like PBS. Lisa Desjardins is an absolute rock star today. She did such an incredible job. And she just stayed with it. She stayed right with it. Her reporting was incredible. She was like Edward R. Murrow yesterday. Lisa Desjardins of PBS NewsHour. You know what? All the Emmys for journalism this year, just put them in a big old stack and give them all to Lisa Desjardins. Amazing. And not only that, not only is she keeping her cool and reporting like an absolute boss through this entire thing, a little bit later, when she gets a moment and finds a quiet spot and just can talk with the anchor, she and Judy Woodruff have one of the more amazing conversations I've ever heard live between two journalists. I wish I could recreate this, and I wish I could find it. I don't even know how we'd go back and find the footage. I don't know if PBS would make it available to us. But her analysis, her description of the MAGA people walking through the halls of Congress, trying doors and walking into offices, she described how kind of bizarrely casual and lackadaisical they were. She described how their body language evoked a kind of entitlement, and yet in their eyes, a very definite intensity. And her analysis in the moment, having only a few minutes to think about this, she said, it really struck me that this is the physical manifestation of the ideas, of the attitudes they've had for so long about Congress, about power, about their own power, about their own disdain for the elites. But her analysis and her insight and her thoughtfulness were so impressive in that moment, displaying a depth of truly thoughtful, philosophical conclusions, if not conclusions, at least an ability to entertain very deep and complicated analysis. I've always been a fan, but Lisa Desjardins, there's nobody better. Talk about witnessing history. We certainly did that, but I had my own Edward R. Murrow there happening as well. I can't say enough about that coverage and her reporting. Just incredible, just incredible. So now we start hearing from a few people. They've been scurried off to safe, undisclosed locations. And people start diving into their little bag of cliches. This is not us. This is not America. You know, the exact opposite of the fawning and gushing I was just doing over Lisa Desjardins. The exact opposite. Just don't have any deep thoughts about this. Just reach into the old cliche bag and pull out a few. Everybody about how the Capitol is this bastion of democracy, this citadel of freedom that the Capitol building is. You know, it made me think of that study by Princeton, I think it was, a couple of years ago, where they proved quite clearly that Congress has absolutely nothing to do with democracy. Remember that report where they said, no, the U.S. is not a democracy, it's an oligarchy. So as serious as yesterday was, and how appalled everyone rightfully was, and I shared that, I did not share the crocodile tears about how this great temple of democracy has been defiled. No, they've been doing a lot of bad things in that building for a very long time. There have been slaveholders in that building, white supremacists in that building. They've cut taxes for billionaires in that building. They've sent American troops to Vietnam and to Iraq in that building. Yeah, they've done a lot of things. They acquitted the Orange Menace in his impeachment trial. In fact, they didn't even allow a trial in that building. So, you know what? You can save it. You can save your crocodile tears about how sacred that building is. You guys defiled that building a long time ago. All right, let's fire through the rest of my notes here, see how far we can get. It was at 6:01 Central Time when I first heard the report that the Association of Manufacturers released a statement calling for the 25th Amendment. Okay, welcome to the party. I welcome all latecomers. So I continue to watch the coverage, and And they're getting people to comment and again pull out the old kit bag and find your trite little cliches and people trying to both sides this thing. Well, both sides do it, which is insane. We have to just blow that thing out of the water and never, ever entertain that silly little both sides argument again. It's just so lazy and so just 100% wrong. And commentators are starting to think on their feet here and try to figure out, well, where do we lay the blame? And some people are very clearly saying, well, you got to lay it at the feet of the Orange Menace, which I agree. But you know what? At this point now, I'm getting pretty sick of hearing conservatives and Republicans say, quote unquote, the right thing. No, they're not saying the right thing unless and until they accept the responsibility themselves. They're the ones. You can go all the way back, as we often do on this program, go all the way back to Ronald Reagan, where he busted unions, cut taxes for the rich, deregulated, bloated military, bloated prisons, bloated cops. It took us down this road. The so-called New Democrats of Clinton and Obama, the cruelty, the sheer dumbness and stupidity of W. Now we got the crazy Tea Party. The anti-intellectual, anti-science element is really taking hold and finding full fruition with the Orange Menace and his merry band of fascist deplorables. It's a straight line. And for years, for decades, conservatives, Republicans have been paving the way, at various points ignoring or justifying or looking the other way or rationalizing, making excuses for this very obvious march that culminated yesterday. I hope it culminated yesterday. I hope that's the worst we're going to see. We got less than 2 weeks. We have, 13 days now to Inauguration Day? What other hell can we experience in the next 13 days? Why do you think all the former secretaries of defense signed that letter warning us of the possible misuse of the military? Of course, Flynn, General Flynn, this has been a couple weeks ago now, recommending martial law in that infamous Oval Office meeting and getting some support from the ever more radical inner circle of the Orange Menace. And then we got word that communication had been shut off and that the Biden transition team was being denied access to the military. Well, why do you suppose that was? Yeah, don't anybody make the mistake that yesterday was the worst possible thing that we may see in these final days. Articles of impeachment are being drawn up as we speak. There are reports that the cabinet has discussed the 25th Amendment. Reporters also tell us that people in that inner circle are confiding in those reporters about how he'll do anything to hold on to power. He's drunk on power. He's unhinged. He's lost it. These are quotes. When it finally came time to get the D.C. National Guard into the picture yesterday, the Orange Menace was nowhere to be found in these discussions. According to the military personnel who make that call, apparently spoke with the congressional leadership and with Mike Pence, and they got the okay. So the Orange Menace was not in on that decision at all. In fact, I found this pretty interesting. For several hours yesterday, nobody in the media knew where Mike Pence was. They literally did not know his location. Now, as it turns out, we see from reporting later in the night and this morning that he was a pretty busy guy, basically acting as president yesterday afternoon. So I guess that's about it. I guess that's about all I have to say today. As far as my notes go, I'm looking at them. Yeah, Congress, of course, reconvenes. We hear a lot of cliches and platitudes, some of which are appropriate, many of which are just eye-roll inducing, especially when the conservatives, oh my God, Josh Hawley. This Josh Hawley from Missouri. He's one of the top sycophants and top objectors. I jotted down this quote. We've seen this year a lot of violence against law enforcement. No, we haven't. We saw violence against law enforcement yesterday. Over the summer, the violence you're referring to, you got that a little bit backwards. That was law enforcement using violence as a tool against peaceful protesters. So even in this moment, when you'd think we could come together, he still has to use this moment as an excuse to advance his own lies, to paint a picture that's not real. And he doesn't let the events of the day dissuade him at all. He still goes into a full rant about how corrupt Pennsylvania is. All of it lies. All of it lies. And in his worst sin of all, he used the word irregardless, just as loudly and clearly as could be. Irregardless. So, all said and done, House and Senate work well into the night, and just before dawn, I guess, they finished their business. They finished up the Arizona objections. They did entertain objections regarding Pennsylvania, so they had that debate. The others, I forget now, Wisconsin, Michigan, who else was on the list? They just let those slide. The objectors said, no, let's not bother. So a little bit of sense there at the end. So they finish up. Our historic day bleeds over into the next day. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be the next president and vice president of the United States, so says a joint session of Congress. And we'll see what tomorrow and ensuing days bring us. But I'm telling you, everybody better stay on high alert. And let's keep these calls coming from everybody. He has to go. And then my bottom line is, we cannot let any conservative, any Republican off the hook. They're going to say the nicest little things. They're going to say the things we want to hear about the sacred nature of democracy and blah, 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 when they've been inciting this kind of violence, this kind of anti-democratic sentiment for years. They've been openly calling for it. They've been ignoring every warning sign. They've been enacting policies that only fuel this fire. We cannot let the Republicans off the hook. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, never with more conviction. The Republican Party, as it exists today, needs to be destroyed. I believe in democracy. I believe in a diverse political field where issues can be debated. But any definition of the current Republican Party does not qualify as a responsible, acceptable player on the political field. Nobody has more disdain for the Orange Menace than I do. But I am not going to put the blame for all of this on him alone when he's the product of years, of decades of decay. And in this past year, literally given a free pass by the very same Republicans who hold office today. The majority Republican vote to deny an impeachment trial and to acquit was the final ultimate act that just swung this door open and allowed him to run right through it, along with all of his deplorables. So, no, we can't let the Republicans off the hook. Nope, they have to go. He has to go, they have to go. All right, those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts for today. Good luck to us all, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm Charles Purcell.